The Thriller Zone with Dave Temple is sponsored by my good friends at The Story Factory, an entertainment company representing many of the biggest fiction and nonfiction authors in the world. Hello, it's your friend Dave Temple, welcoming you to another episode of The Thriller Zone. That's right, your number one thriller, mystery, and suspense fiction, film, and TV podcast in the world. Today, I have the honor of welcoming my friend Mark Gottlieb, Senior VP and Literary Agent at Trident Media Group. Mark's back for a return visit to share some super tasty insights into the world of book publishing. Now, what makes Mark an expert, you ask? Well, he's built a distinguished career representing numerous New York Times bestselling and award-winning authors at TMG, where his experience includes foreign rights and audiobook departments. As you will quickly learn, Mark has a strong track record in negotiating significant deals across various genres, and besides all those accolades, he's just a super kind and down-to-earth man who still believes in the power of story. Please welcome to the Thriller Zone, Mark Gottlieb. First of all, let me say officially so we can get this thing rolling, because I know you are a power player and I got to respect the time. Welcome back to the Thriller Zone, Mark Gottlieb.
It's really good to be back, and thank you so much.
We have so much to cover today. I do want to say, too, last we spoke on the show, you had not had that handsome little son, right?
That's right. Yeah, Ian, he's about 6 months old now, and he's doing his teething, so we're back to very little sleep at night, but it's okay.
Oh, I followed you on, I think it was Instagram. I was watching all the photographs and I'm like, there is a proud papa for sure.
Yeah, we put his books together and everything, so I love reading to him. That movie Shrek was a book originally, a children's picture book.
Okay.
And I think the William Steig is the author and illustrator, and he Shrek was originally serialized as cartoons in the New Yorker. The children's picture book version's a little bit different. I mean, you still have like the donkey and Shrek and the knight and all of that.
Sure.
But there's definitely a much more of an adult tinge of humor to it, and I think the vocabulary is tough for kids, but it's hilarious. Like, I laugh out loud while reading it to him.
When you first said that you said you had a book for your son, I thought you were already inking a deal with him. And I'm like, is he writing yet?
I find that like parents who have kids, they suddenly they're in tune with that audience, and they're wanting to write those kinds of books because they're reading them day in, day out. But honestly, been doing a lot of thrillers. I started working with this guy, Daniel G. Miller, who's a USA Today bestselling author. He has this book called The Orphanage by the Lake, which, he had originally self-published that book. And he sold, tons and tons of copies. We got him moved over to Poison Pen Press. It's part of Source Books, and they're majorly owned by, actually, I think now they might be completely owned by Penguin Random House. And so he's happy. They went back and bought some more books. And he, it's a big life change for him. When he came to New York to meet with me, he said, he flew to my office. He had changed his whole life. He sold his dry cleaning business. He moved to Miami, and he was writing full time. The self-publishing was working out for him. And he said to me, I want to be a number one New York Times bestselling author. And I didn't laugh, or I didn't make a face. I didn't have any kind of reaction. I didn't scoff or anything like that. I just looked at him and I said, you know what? You're absolutely right to want to think that way, because you need to be audacious for those sorts of things to happen. Like Barack Obama, the title of his book was The Audacity of Hope. He had to have been thinking to himself at the time when he was running for president, like, I'm going to be the first Black president.
Yeah.
If he wasn't thinking with that level of audacity, now it's not audacious anymore that he's done it. But, otherwise those things would never happen. So I was so glad to hear from someone that it's not like their head's too big. They just hold themselves in high esteem.
Yeah.
And he's on that track now,
Well, I think there's a whole lot to be said for, and I wholeheartedly believe in this, that you need to have a solid intention. You have to really place in your mind, this is what I want. This is what I want more than anything. I'm willing to make the sacrifices that it's going to take, no matter what. And if you start there, I think you have a better chance. But I hear so many people go, "Oh, I could never do that." Well, you've already kind of set yourself up for that, haven't you?
Was the big word of what are we in 2025? It was manifesting, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's a big part of it. The same way they say 80% of success is just showing up. I mean, I can't be on your podcast unless I show up here. So there's 80%. But I think when you speak those words, it's like saying something in the mirror, and then it slowly becomes a reality. And so, you know, I'm finding that to be the case, and I'm always trying to, build people up.
Hmm.
Like, I do an online writing workshop around, comp titles. Like, how do you say, "My book is, this meets that?" And
Yeah.
what I hear from a lot of writers who I come across when we're talking about, comparative or competitive book titles, comp titles, um, they say, "Well, I heard from someone I shouldn't compare myself to a bestseller because, I could be laughed at, or they won't really believe me or take me seriously." And I said, "You know what? You have to hold yourself in high esteem." So, you know, I encourage them in that way, and anyway.
Isn't that also an expeditious way to get to the point? I mean, especially in an elevator pitch, if you've only got a matter of seconds to speak to someone and to pitch them, if you go, "Hey, I'm looking behind you. It's Logan's Run meets Shrek." Okay, I'm just pulling that out,
Yeah.
which sounds crazy, but you're like, you instantly, because you're familiar with both Logan's Run and Shrek, you went, "Oh, so it's Logan's Run meets Shrek in a uh, uh, Walt Disney universe." I'm so obscure. The point being, you've now pulled a well-known title, and placed it inside a well-known world. So it just jettisons you to the pitch instantly.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I say to writers who, maybe in a nervous moment, they've forgotten the hook, the quick pitch for their book. Like, some of them, even I've seen on the back of business cards, they'll write it down so they don't forget. And, actually, this is my personal calling card. This is not my business card.
Okay.
It's, just a little clever, thing there.
Is that Satan
Anyway,
since 1967?
it's 1987.
Oh,
I'm not
80.
that old.
Okay. Ooh, sorry.
It's Alright, 1967's not old. That's still sprightly, I think. For writers, you're right. They could always fall back on the comp titles. And I think, a good one is like a major best-selling book published within the last 5 years, ideally, a couple of those. So, I find that people sometimes will lean on that if they have to, and, so it's good to have those. But beyond it being a way to hold your work in high esteem, and publishing being a business too,
Sure.
when publishers are running their numbers in these profit and loss statements, or we call them P&L sheets, um, the magic numbers they're going to plug in for how they're going to predict how a book could do is really going to be those comp titles. So it's important to have that well in hand. Yeah.
Have you come across a comp title, say in the last year or so, that you went, "Wow, not only is that a riveting comp, but your story actually matches it"?
Oh yeah. I mean, there are times where the comps could be far off, where it matches great. Will it ever be 100% spot on? I mean, impossible,
Yeah.
because every author, every book is unique unto itself, right? Can't really replicate everything, but if it even shares the vaguest aspect with the book, it could be a reasonable comp. And the main goal being this, it's to hold your work, in high esteem, you know? And so if it accomplishes that, like it was a major bestseller or a major award-winning book, then I think you could have a good comp on your hands.
And before I spin off of that comp story, have you ever, does this work? Could you comp a major selling book and a hyper popular TV show, like, say, for instance, Severance, which everybody's talking about on
Oh, I've been
Apple?
watching that. I was just talking about that with someone. Yeah.
So if you said, you could give me a title like, okay, I'm trying to think of something. Okay, I've got Adrian McKenty coming up on the show soon, and he's got
Oh, that'll be a good one.
Hang on, Hang on, St. Christopher meets uh, Severance.
Severin.
Okay, now again, that's very obscure, but I'm just making the point of this world of a book.
Yep.
Sean Duffy in a corporate. How do you?
You I think you get the point across that
Yeah,
way, but the thing is that publishers and agents, they're trying to figure out, where does this book go on my list?
yeah,
Where does it go in a bookstore, and how well might this book do? And so in giving someone, like, saying, my book is like this TV show or that movie or that song or that Broadway play, it doesn't help in the same way as if you gave a book.
got
So
it.
you'd be better off, for instance, I feel like a show and better yet, a book that has a lot of kinship with Severance is, well, Blake Crouch. He wrote that book, Dark Matter, and I think there were some, like, sequels or similar books that spun off of it. So that might be, like, a better comp if someone were, seeking something like that out. Um, it's funny, those are, like, the 2 shows I've been watching right now. Um, yeah.
I know that I have done studies recently on the show, and I'm finding between the world of shortening attention spans, people drop out of the show quicker these days than they used to. So there's a couple points I really want to get to that are essential to having this conversation. And I know something about you and I. We've built a friendship to where we could sit down and probably talk for several hours. But A, you're a busy guy, don't have time. B, we got other things to do and talk about. But there's a couple things. I don't want to gloss over what's it like to be a super agent, because you're going to think I'm spoofing on you, but you are one of the most prolific, powerful, popular, any other P word I can think of real quick, um, um, of agents in the world today at Trident Media Group. So I want to kind of get a glimpse of, what's it like? You could say a day in the life, or you could say how long it took me to get here, as before we move on to the second, more even bigger point.
Well, I could tell people, yes, definitely a little bit of the day in the life of an agent, and in getting here, I mean, we talked about this too a little bit on the last show. My journey was a little bit unique or different from other people who might have kind of stumbled into publishing out of the humanities. Although now a lot of schools have degrees, both undergraduate and graduate degrees in publishing. I never thought to myself, like, oh gosh, I could get a master's degree in publishing, and it's suddenly a new thing. It's funny, if I went back to get that degree, I'd be sitting there thinking to myself, I should be teaching this class, not sitting in it. But anyway, yeah, I grew up in the family business. Both my folks always worked in publishing, so I was always around books all my life, authors, books. And so, I studied publishing at college and started a small press and worked at Penguin Books, and then worked my way up at the agency and built out a big client list. I mean, these are not some of them, not all of them, but a lot of the books I've worked on behind me there. I had to make room on the bookshelf, so there's some stacks over there. But yeah, a day in the life of an agent, what's that like? You know, that's the interesting thing. You could walk into the office and never know what's gonna be coming your way. Like, but some of the regular reoccurring stuff. We're doing outreach, like trying to sign new clients to the agency all the time. Be they coming our way by referrals or query letters, or what we're reading and seeing online, or whatever. Um, so signing up clients to the agency and then working with them to prepare their manuscripts to be submitted to publishers. So we craft a pitch with them, work on a submission list with them, go out on submission, field offers from publishers. And I can tell you that publishers getting a submission from Trident, they perk right up because of the clout of the agency. They know our work. So, um, we get good deals for authors, good contracts, and, we help the author through the publishing process too. So it's sort of like, I suppose, what a talent agent would do out west, only we do for authors and books, and we're situated here in New York City where book publishing is. This is really the heart of major trade book publishing.
Well, if anybody goes to your website, I had not been to your website recently, and if you go to the homepage, tridentmediagroup.com, it's a who's who of some of the best, biggest books out there, many of whom who have been on the show, which was an extra little bonus to me, feeling kind of proud of that. But uh, so th- one of the other great things about Trident Media Group is you represent a bevy of nonfiction authors as well as fiction. A lot of people go in this world, thriller fiction, that's our whole world. But I'm like, be aware of the fact that there is a volume of nonfiction books out there. Do you have a ratio of what is more popular at a moment in time, or something that sells better, or is that just literally as the wind blows?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, the wind does blow in publishing, but it blows like a breeze, not like a gust, maybe, it's very kind of slow moving. Not to say it's not strong or anything. It's just, things don't really turn on a dime in publishing. But we work in a range of spaces, like you say, between fiction, nonfiction, even children's books and graphic novels. Nonfiction has always been very subject driven and, sort of who the writer's platform is. Fiction is always going to be really driven by quality of writing and storytelling. And then by extension of that, an author becomes a brand or a household name. And the interesting thing is that I find in fiction, commercial fiction, be it, thrillers or romance or sci-fi fantasy, whatever, it's sort of like the industry is very sort of reactionary in a way. A big title comes about, and not until another one happens does the industry really adjust or change to that. Like when Dan Brown wrote the Da Vinci Code,
Uh-huh.
suddenly publishers were on to wanting to do, more, historical kind of treasure hunting, thriller sorts of books. Or when Gillian Flynn wrote Gone Girl, publishing really got stuck on domestic noir, domestic suspense, which oddly enough it's still really stuck on. And publishing is kind of, I think, feeling like sort of fatigued by it, and yet those books just keep going and going. And so I don't know what will sort of come about to be the next big thing. No one can predict that. But when it arrives, um, I don't want to say there's a lot of mimicry in publishing, but every publisher and author will be thinking to themselves, where's my version of that book?
Sure.
So that's what it takes to reinvent like a given genre, a book that really lifts the entire industry, be it like a Colleen Hoover, or someone like that.
Did you notice, of course you noticed, what a silly question, when Gone Girl had its stratospheric success, it seems like every book for a long time had the word girl in it.
Yeah, in fact, there are still some books that are doing that. And I think it's not for any kind of lack of creativity, but I think it's meant as like a kind of branding cue to readers as to say, this book is like that big best-selling book over there. It kind of goes back to the comp thing
Comps. Yeah.
in a way. Same thing with Da Vinci Code. After the Da Vinci Code, there are all these books with the word code in it,
Yeah.
you know? So it's sort of like, I don't want to say knock off brands, but, so that people can understand at a glance what kind of book it is.
Well, and to that point, I want to go to one of my very first, what I call official questions, because I'll write some down, and a lot of them I'm going to just go off the cuff like you and I do. But this has to do with assessing author potential. So when evaluating, a new author comes into your office and across your desk, what specific writing qualities do you find makes you confident that they're worth the investment of your time, energy, resources for representation?
Well, there are a few different things I'll look at from an author, obviously quality of writing, quality of storytelling, which is different than writing. Storytelling, I think, concerns itself more so with things like plot and stuff like that. Quality of writing is like, how well can this person write a sentence?
Sure.
Do they understand basic grammar, things
Yeah.
like that? Um, sometimes I'll look at the author's credentials, like what's their writing experience like? What's their background in writing? Did they go and get that MFA? Have they published in literary magazines and journals? If they're a thriller writer, or mystery crime thriller writer, if they've written for Ellery Queen magazine, that's a fantastic, publication, or if they've written for the Strand magazine, stuff like that. Um, you know, uh, if they're a nonfiction author, we take their platform into consideration and other things. But basically, um, it's got to be good writing and good storytelling at the end of the day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And to that point, talking about the role of author platform, and I remember when I went to my first Thriller Fest, and everything was about platform. And how critical do you think it is today? And I know it's shifted over the last decade. How critical is an author's existing platform or public presence, however you want to put it, in your decision to offer representation? And what advice do you give authors looking to build that compelling, a word that my wife and I always kid that people overuse, a compelling platform?
That's the interesting thing. I mean, platform used to always be concerned with nonfiction books, and then sort of this very odd thing I'm finding now more and more is that publishers get excited by the thought of an author who already had a fiction author who already has a big platform with the audience, kind of baked in. Like you're seeing a lot of these people who are basically TikTok personalities,
Sure.
writing books and them going on to become bestsellers because, at the flip of a switch, they could tell all their followers to go and buy the book. It's probably a mixed bag. Like some of it is people who are buying a book to own a piece of that author, to own a piece of that brand, and then other people who know it. Maybe it's good storytelling and good writing. Like I have a client, Kelsey and Pichichi, who I found her on TikTok because I browse TikTok from time to time looking for new potential authors. And what she's actually known for is she's got millions of followers, but she plays video games for a living and records herself playing video games. Remember that game, The Sims?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, yeah. And so she plays that. She's very good at it. She had a column for a while on BuzzFeed, Newsweek BuzzFeed, doing, writing like some comedic stuff. And anyway, I had reached out to her completely thinking maybe she would want to do a nonfiction book about video games. Well, turns out she was working on a romantasy book called Voice of the Ocean. And, it's kind of like a dark retelling of The Little Mermaid.
Uh-huh.
We sold it to a publisher. They're very excited about it. They're backing it in a big way. They've already bought like a couple books from her. They went back and bought more. So there's a little bit of that going on too, which is, I don't want to say it's volatility in the marketplace, but what's unique or different about it is it's kind of like Johnny Depp having a really big following of his own. When he stars in a movie, he's not just a recognizable face. He brings a lot of other stuff, to the table. The same way that people might make an argument that baseball players are overpaid, right? There's no salary cap on it.
Right.
But a baseball player, what they bring to the table is everyone in that stadium showed up to watch them play.
Yeah.
And the people who benefit are the people who are selling the merch and selling the food and everything in the stadium. That ecosystem exists around them and because of them. So it's different than someone who's stumbling out of an MFA program and no one's ever heard that person's name. How is that the publisher going to market an author like that? That presents its own set of challenges. So yeah, the internet is creating some interesting chaos.
Sure.
Right.
And something I've been watching lately is Substack. So Substack is a great way that someone like me, as an author, indie author, could do a series on a Substack. And if you just happen to have people who follow you who are interested in your storytelling, your audience grows. And then beyond that, if you are savvy enough and people really want you enough, then they might pay for a subscription. Either way, anything, in my opinion, is anything that gets eyeballs and engagement. That's the number one name of the game. Now, yes, the quality has to be there. Yes, the consistency has to be there. Yes, you got to have a pretty decent mind for marketing. But I think back to our very first initial conversation, if you set the intention and you really hone and practice every day, practice meaning just getting in the chair and writing, then I think that's more than half of the battle, don't you?
Yeah, it's the same thing that 80% of success is showing up. I forget who said, but if every day you wrote one page, end of the year, you have a full book, 365 days, 365 pages, right?
Yeah.
Um, the Substack thing is a very interesting thing because the internet presents all these opportunities for writers to kind of further monetize their work. There's this author I work with, Christopher Brown, he's a Philip K. Dick Award nominee. He tends to write kind of literary, speculative thrillers. Um, for instance, the premise of his first book, Tropic of Kansas, and this book we were out on submission with this book, I think in 2016 or early 2017. I mean, Donald Trump had barely even shown up on the campaign trail. The premise of the book was that a telegenic businessman of a dictator becomes president of the United States and tells us to build walls between us and Canada, between us and Mexico. We build those walls. And little do we realize, the next thing we know, we're being policed by aerial drones, and those walls weren't meant to keep people out; they were meant to keep people in. And I mean, we're kind of living this, today. I mean, it's pretty wild.
Orwellian, yeah.
Yeah, editors were like, "How could you have predicted this?" Said, "I just tried to imagine the scariest thing possible."
And we're
Anyway,
living it.
yeah, but he created a Substack where he was writing about nature and living in Austin, Texas. And he has a fascinating home that's been in some Apple TV documentary and some architectural magazines and things like that. And a lot of people in publishing and writers were following his Substack. And it became apparent to us that he had to do a nonfiction book, around this. And so I actually have the book, right here. I could grab a
Yeah, let me
copy.
see it.
Let's see.
Okay, while Mark finds the book, let's take a short break. We'll be right back. When you think of the best thriller fiction authors in the world, who comes to mind? Could it be Don Winslow, Meg Gardner, Adrian McKenty? Check, check, and check. How about T.J. Newman, Lou Berney, or Steve Hamilton? Again, a triple check. The company behind those half dozen number one New York Times bestselling authors is The Story Factory, this week's sponsor. And today's guest, Eric Rickstad, is part of that esteemed group, and his new book, Remote the Six, is a thriller so terrifying you must see it to believe it. A serial killer is rampaging across the country, tying families to chairs arranged in puzzling tableaus, then murdering them without leaving a single trace of evidence. FBI Special Agent Lucas Stark has been hunting the tableau killer for 18 months, but seems to be 2 steps behind in a maze of dead ends. So when Garner, an odd loner with a vague past, claims he's a remote viewer, someone who sees people, places, and events from far away, Stark begrudgingly takes him along in hopes of catching the killer. Pre-order your copy of Remote the Six today, wherever you buy your books.
Welcome back to the Thriller Zone.
So this is A Natural History of Empty Lots.
Oh, wow.
Field notes from urban edgelands, back alleys, and other wild places. He had done this book with Hachette Books. They have an imprint there called Timber Books.
Uh-huh.
And we got the nice quotes on the back, like
Beautiful.
Jeff Vandermeer and Kelly Link and others. And so, yeah, this started completely as a Substack.
And how apropos that the publishing company is Timber Books on lots and homes.
Oh, well, because their whole thing, this publishing imprint, they're all about books about nature and things like that. And actually, that's his home.
Oh, wow.
Of the book there.
It looks like
which
a
I've
Frank
been
Lloyd
to.
Wright.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's almost like, you know what? Kind of like a hobbit house. It's built into the land, so it's naturally heated and cooled by the earth. and they have a saltwater pool, so it doesn't require any kind of chlorine or anything like that, so the animals can still be around the pool and stuff like that. And then what he did with this property that he bought in Austin, Texas, because he's a bit of an ecologist, he rewilded the land. So he introduced wild flora and fauna that you could only find in the far out wilds of Texas and right in the middle of the city of Austin. I mean, his whole property is fenced in, but there are wild animals all around,
I
and
love it.
it's pretty cool. The other book I mentioned earlier, the TikTok star who, did this book, Voice of the Ocean. This is with Blackstone.
Wow.
Some nice quotes on the back there too from Colleen Houck and Brian Chick. But yeah, this kind of started online as well in TikTok. So you never know. I mean,
You never know.
you got to be putting yourself out there. That's the thing.
Put yourself out there, follow your dreams, set your intentions. And, I wanted to make this comment. I didn't want to make it sound like it's all about me, but I remember when I was about 15 years old, I wanted to be on the radio. I knew that's what I wanted to do. My voice had changed way early. I had that ability to think quick on my feet. I used to, sit in the closet with a hairbrush and pretend I was on the radio, but that's what I wanted to do. And I'm like, I don't care what it takes, but I want to be in at least 5 of the top 10 radio markets in the world before I reach 40. I mean, that was at 15, 16, and I did it. And my point is not to toot my horn, but to say, set your intentions and come from a place of honesty and passion, not, oh, I want to be a rock star. Yeah, maybe you want to be a rock star, but my point is set the intention. And I applaud that. And I love the fact that, that these people were just following their dreams, doing their passions, and then the wave came to them.
After you set those intentions, you got to sort of wake up every morning and be doing those things.
Yeah.
Kelsey had already fully written this book. There's a video she made online where, she talks about what it was like experiencing rejection and then finally finding like her publisher. And actually we got the quote on the front from Sherilyn Kenyon, #1 New York Times bestselling author.
Wow.
So yeah, she's happy about it. But I think there's also a lot more to it in terms of fiction. Like you got to know your craft and, and the movements within the marketplace too,
Now, you've heard this phrase, we talk about this on the show, writing to market. If you see something that's popular and you sit down, it may not even be your wheelhouse, but you will write to that market, knowing that you're going to spend somewhere between 6 months and probably 2 years to get that book into process. A lot of the folks like yourself in your position say, don't do that because the market may shift at any given moment. Do you agree with that pretty much?
Yes and no. Publishing being slow moving, and even the amount of time it takes for a book to get out there, most publishers aren't looking to publish at least for 12 to 18 months, either from date of a signed contract or delivery of manuscript. But, I think if you're going to try and ride the crest of a wave, you got to be just kind of almost right out there near the crest. Like if you're too far out from the wave, that's it. You won't really catch the wave.
Right.
So that's timing is key with that stuff. Like even people being, romanticy sucking all the oxygen up in the room, or, books about Donald Trump in the nonfiction space sucking all the oxygen up in the room. If you're going to try and be one of those books, it's hard to stand out in that crowded marketplace. I've always believed it's better to be the one making the waves. Like I'd rather be Dan Brown than one of his imitators, That being said, it's hard to make those waves, and sometimes people will want to try and write to the market. And so I can understand that. But yeah, you got to be kind of early to the party if you can get there.
I like your metaphor for catching the wave, because being here in San Diego, I sit there on the cliffs and I watch the surfers, because I'm not going to get there and do that. And it's so amazing to me how long they will sit and they will catch little tiny bits of it, but they know when the water is moving at such a certain way that if they time it just right, they can catch that wave. And that's always been fascinating to me. So folks, think about it as you're writing your book. Now, we mentioned something early on, and I want to make sure I cover this before we bail out of here, and it has to do with query letters, because, man, you and I could spend an entire hour just on that. But my question is, what common mistakes do you think authors make in their query letters? A, B, and what components do you believe are essential to crafting those letters that truly capture your attention?
Well, the funny thing about that is there's so much you could do wrong with a query letter that why suffer and toil over worrying about all the things you can do wrong when you could just focus on the things that can be done right.
Yeah,
That's how I it could be I'm a glass half full kind of guy.
sure.
I try to be an optimist. And so, I mean, what I think is a good query letter is it fits all in one page, up front. Actually, if I were to read out like an imaginary query letter to you, it would
Uh-huh.
maybe something like, Dear so-and-so, I'm seeking representation for my debut novel titled blank for readers of blank and blank. Those are those comp titles in which, and then you give a quick one-line pitch of what the book's about, and then maybe a body paragraph or two about some of the exciting plot details of the book without too many major spoilers. Then the last paragraph of the letter, basically a one-paragraph author bio, listing off relevant writing experience, writing credentials, and you thank them, close out the letter, include your contact details, and you have a perfect letter. It flows. The most important information's up front, all fits on one page. And, if you, I think, I'm not saying it's one size fits all. We've have sold a lot of books off of that kind of method, though. But I think it will free people up in a lot of ways not to have to worry about all the rest if they kind of try to approach it through a framework like that.
That deserves a little golf clap because that just nailed it right.
I'm gonna add that to my repertoire, golf clap. I like that.
Yeah,
That's
that's
I,
awesome.
gotta get the green blazer to go with it.
Hey, that's just around the corner, by the way.
Right?
Um, as I close, I always ask my writers, my authors, what's your best writing advice? But for you, I'm going to sit on the fence because I want to know your best advice for aspiring thriller writers as it pertains to, and we're going to go back to the notes we made, making sure your platform is intact, that you are or are not writing to market, perhaps, that you're aware of trends and genre demands, etc. Your query letter is all buttoned up, and kind of putting all that into one big heap. What's that best advice you could offer?
Honestly, yeah, I think, for authors writing in the thriller space, which is actually a very competitive marketplace, obviously, like I said before, great writing, great storytelling, that goes without saying. But I think you've got to be attuned to the craft of writing within a genre and the needs of the marketplace. Like you mentioned Thriller Fest and that being a great event. And actually it's right here in New York City, so it's in the heart of book publishing. And there's some other good thriller related events all over the country. Someone said to me, as mystery crime thriller writers, if they have one choice, it should be BoucherCon, because it's great for networking and that event moves all over the country, each year. I hear there's Left Coast Crime and other ones, but those are great events. And, I feel like the audience will come, but you have to also just have a vision for the future. Like that guy who he came to my office and he was imagining his future self, or I think Michael Jordan did the same thing. He would kind of project a vision of himself, like, dunking the ball or whatever it was he was going to do. So I think that's really important. If you don't have the platform, at least be conceiving of one, you know, all these steps toward these goals.
Man, that is so good. See, Mark, you're a wealth, a fount of knowledge and wisdom.
Well, and you've got the voice for this show. I wish I had a radio voice. That would be pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, I might have the voice, but you got the smarts, and you're sitting in the big office in the big chair in the Big Apple. So how you doing?
Hey, I love mystery crime thrillers. I think they're a great group of writers. They're some of the toughest writers out there. Like they've got a lot of grit and stamina about them because they know that, it's not easy. And so I have a lot of respect for writers and how hard they work. And when someone gets to that point like that, I mentioned that guy, Daniel G. Miller, there are other clients here, I'm very happy for them. That's the best feeling in the world, cheering someone on toward the finish line and all that.
Yeah, you have such a wonderful job and an opportunity to, going back to your glass half full, to be able to lift the spirits of writers who are truly talented and to be able to sit there and applaud them and push them forward. What a great place to be. I'm sitting here thinking about you're going to drop somewhere in the 220, 221, 222, whatever it takes of the show. And I think back, June will mark 4 years this podcast has been going. And I think of all the hundreds of authors I've spoken to, the hundreds of books that I've read, and a few things I have learned. And I want to see how it bounces off with you. Like if somebody just said, hey, come speak in front of a group, this is what I'd say. You can tell often by the first chapter, nowadays by the first page, and more often than not by the first paragraph when somebody really knows what they're doing. And I can name off right now 5 books I've read just since we turned into the new year that I thought, I look at, maybe I judge a book by its cover a little bit too much, or I read some of the blurb and I'm like, whatever. But I can tell you, when I get to that one paragraph, I'm like, you've got me so pulled in that I cannot not double negative, not turn that page to keep going. And 9 times out of 10, you got me hooked.
Oh, yeah. I mean, James Patterson's a great example of that. I mean, his books are like potato chips, and every page, every paragraph, sentence, and word within them, like they're written to be, just addictive brain candy. And, but even if you read the classics, like when I first picked up Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, same thing. In reading the first paragraph, you're like, you're in the hands of a master. Like it's incredible. So, it's so cool. And,
James,
congratulations too. I want to say I should have started with that. 4 years and all the writers you've had on the show and the books, you've read to familiarize yourself with them and their work. That's an incredible achievement. So congratulations again.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you, you can tell the difference between when you can really absorb the book and then throw it and engage in a conversation back to the author versus when you're flying through it. But I remember James kicked off our 8th season in January on the show here, which was a huge honor because he's the guy who he lit the fire in me where between he and Michael Crichton, I'm like, I can do this. I can be a writer. It's going to take a while, but I can do it. And I said this to him, and it was funny to watch him go, yeah, fanboy. But he said, the key is, I think he quoted Elmore Leonard, cut out the stuff nobody wants to read. And the other thing is just be concise. Tell me the story. Don't get so wrapped up in the floral diatribes and the voluminous backstory. Just tell me the story that's happening. And when you hear that and you absorb it and you really take it to heart, you go, there's the magic.
Yeah, he's great at outlining things like that. You mentioned Jim. I'll show you just one more thing here. Let me grab it from my shelf.
Grab it.
Okay, let's see. Is it here, or I might even have it in this bag?
Take your time.
So that author I mentioned before, Daniel G. Miller, who came to my office, he said, I want to be, a #1 New York Times bestselling author. Look who gave him a quote on the top of the book there.
Bam.
I don't know how often, James Patterson really gives out blurbs or quotes like that. So when we got a quote from Jim, we were like, we got to put that right on the top front cover, at the top of the cover. That's a selling blurb right there. So,
and the fact that it's one word, irresistible, says volumes. Yeah, look at that. Now, before we go, because I got to drill down on this. I was going to let it go, but I really want to drill down on this because I've read some diatribes recently about people who go, why do we spend so much time worried about blurbs? And I found myself listening to the angel and the devil on my shoulders, it really matters because it, if I pick it up and I go, James Patterson liked it, it must say something. The devil, yeah, but how often do those actually come from the author, or are they bought, or are they, reductive from somewhere, another conversation? So
I remember there was some definitely some back and forth online about it. There's someone in publishing who is young and new and a bit wants, I think, to be a bit like of an iconoclast, you could say. And that, to their credit, they have some good ideas. They're an interesting person. They got where they are for a reason. But there's a reason why people do outreach for blurbs. If you get a blurb from Stephen King or James Patterson, that's a big selling blurb. But if you're laboriously doing it and you're getting blurbs from names that might not help as much, then I can see why that would eat up time. So basically, the short of it is, yeah, there was a publisher, them being Simon & Schuster, who suddenly made an announcement: we're not going to require you to do outreach for blurbs anymore. And an author, a thriller author, I think it may have been Rebecca Mackay or someone, spoke out saying, now, wait a minute, I work really hard to get blurbs. I give blurbs and it's an important part of what we do. There's some use in it. Some people said, well, it doesn't sell books. I mean, I think it sells books. And why would people do it if it didn't make any sense? If you can show me the data, if you can show me the real research, that speaks to the fact that blurbs don't sell books, then absolutely you have an argument there. But
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, I think someone's going to pick this book up, see James Patterson's name, and want to buy the book.
Yeah, I probably would. I'd be that guy.
I got to send you a copy then. After this, send me your address. I'll mail you a copy.
Okay. I am sorry that we did not yet again. I'm embarrassed about this because I told you on our last conversation that I really wanted to do the London Book Fair with you because I'm like, of anybody who's going to be there, I wanted to hang there with you.
A good one, right? Fun town.
I'm going to put it on my calendar for next year. That is my hope. That is my dream because it's, yes, there are a lot of fairs here in the States, but that one particular, I remember you saying specifically, boy, that is one to attend.
Yeah, a lot of international publishers converge there. Same with the Frankfurt Book Fair. There's some in the U.S. that are pretty good. Like I checked out AWP and I loved that event. This past year it was in Los Angeles, which is, I think, a great town for that because you get an interesting cross-section of people there. Probably, if I had to guess, there were a lot of film and TV, like media kind of people converging with book publishing people,
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much for the gift of your time. It's always just a genuine pleasure to hang out with you.
Likewise, this is fun. And congrats again. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Now, how would you like a sneak peek into next week's guest to the Thriller Zone? I'll give you two guesses in the form of two names, a first and a last. Sean Duffy. Okay, that's the lead character's name, but the New York Times bestselling author behind that character is Adrian McKenty, someone I have been trying to get on this podcast for a very long time. So join us next week when I sit down with the guy who's coming off two back-to-back bestsellers with The Chain and The Island. Now, last thing before I go, would you consider doing your pal here a favor and dropping me a line at thethrillerzone.com? Just let me know if you're liking the show, what you're liking most about the show, and whether you'd like to continue hearing more of this podcast. It won't take but 2 minutes, but it'll mean a whole lot. The website is thethrillerzone.com. Our email is thethrillerzone@gmail.com. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe. All right, I'm Dave Temple. I'll see you next week for another riveting episode of The Thriller Zone.
Your number one podcast for stories that thrill, The Thriller Zone.
The Thriller Zone with Dave Temple has been sponsored by my good friends at The Story Factory, an entertainment company representing many of the biggest fiction and nonfiction authors in the world.